There you
All
go.
right.
All right.
Michael, thank you for accepting my invitation.
All right. No problem. It's uh,
So
I
we're
thought
we're we're both writers, and we actually have a pretty funny story of how I actually discovered you, right, on Substack.
yeah.
So I think a couple of months ago, maybe after I started writing 1 or 2 months, I just literally searched Indonesian writer because I also wanted to find
Mhm.
a common interest, someone who has a
Yeah.
common interest. And
Mm.
your Substack came up. I should mention. So you have two Substacks, right?
Yeah.
Germanicious Publishing, which is
Germanicus.
wait,
That's
Germanicious?
Germanicus.
Oh,
Yeah. That's
Germanicus.
yeah.
Jesus, all this time I thought it was Germanicus. Okay, I'll probably ask you what that means. And then the
Mhm.
Substack that I found was Indonesian and American.
Yep.
And then it turns out that we went to the same high school in Global Jaya, right?
Yeah. That's
Over a
so funny.
decade, over a decade ago, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you asked me whether or not I have a brother by this Halim, and then turns out my twin brother was actually your old
Yeah.
classmate over a
Yeah.
decade ago.
Yep.
So
Hmm.
were you literally in the same classroom as Mike, my twin brother?
No, we're actually not in the same classroom, but I
But
think
he knows
we're
you. He
kind of
knows you. He's familiar
yeah,
with
because
you.
we're I don't know, I wasn't the most social person, so I don't really talk with a lot of people. So he's like one of the few people there I talk to, so that's why I remember
Oh,
him. So,
really? But you were never literally in the same class,
I
same sub
mean, maybe we might have like when like
pass
10th grade, but
passed by
like
each
not
other.
in like afterwards. Yeah.
Right, right. So actually, I moved out of Indonesia in 2007. I think mid 2007. I
Oh, okay.
don't May, maybe April, May, if I remember correctly. It was so long ago, and we probably missed each other by a few months. When did you actually go to Indonesia?
So I
When
went back from Maryland, so I went to ninth grade in Maryland. So
Oh, so you were
that's
in the Netherlands before Indonesia.
no, no, not Netherlands, in America, in America.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say 2007. So when in 2007 I went back from Maryland, from America to Indonesia,
Oh,
and then I finished my
Maryland. Maryland. I heard Netherlands. I'm sorry. Maryland. Okay, Maryland.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, probably around 2007. Yeah, basically.
Do you remember what month was it?
Around September, maybe
Oh,
like
September.
September, August, yeah, like summer. So it's like I finished like that year there, and then we go there.
Right, right. So we probably missed each other by a few months.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So you went from
Yeah.
Maryland, and then you went from Maryland, and then you went to Indonesia, and then you went back to Maryland.
Well, I went to college in New Jersey. That's about 4 years, and then I went to Maryland. So I graduated from Rutgers in New Jersey. That's around 2014. So I guess I've been living in Maryland continuously, I would say, for like almost 10 years by now.
Oh, so when did you move back to the States from Indonesia? 2010?
Yeah, 2010. That's when I go to.
Oh, so you were in Indonesia for only 3 years then,
Well, that's for
2007.
my high school, but
Yeah, yeah, only in
I
high school.
I kind of grew up like went to grade school, like elementary school in Indonesia until like sixth grade. So
Yeah, so you moved back and forth, huh?
yeah, yes, yeah, yes, yeah, it's a little complicated.
Right, right. Well, I had a couple of questions. I think the first one I wanted to ask, well, first of all, I think the reason why I wanted to talk to you is because I just think we have this commonality, but it's sort of a weird,
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to call it weird, but this whole what would you say it? Maybe passion is too pompous of a word, but passion for writing English or writing articles or opinion pieces or things like that. We just have
yeah,
I guess we both enjoy it for some reason.
yeah. Hmm.
You more on the fiction side, which is quite amazing to me. Tell me a little bit
Hmm.
more about why you like writing, and probably I'll say a few words after that.
Like writing in general, you mean?
In
Like or like
general.
okay. Well, I guess, I like to like, I'm very opinionated. I guess you probably figured that out from my stuff,
Yeah,
but
we should talk about
uh,
artificial intelligence later on.
yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, but so like I have a lot of things to say, but I'm not the most like, like outgoing, and I'm a very, maybe it'll be shocking, but I'm a very articulate. So I kind of sometimes I stutter, and I like to think about like what I said. So,
Yeah.
so that's why sometimes I end up writing, and I don't know, I guess part of it is like, it's like I tend to be in my own world, so that's how that's like, okay, you gotta write, and if you want to say like, why do I like to write certain things, you gonna have to like be more specific, but it's gonna be a whole nother story.
Well. I mentioned fiction because I think a couple of weeks ago I was made aware. Well, I saw one of your posts in Substack that you actually just finished your first. Is it your first book?
Yeah, yeah, my first novel, yeah.
Fictional, which is amazing, right? I don't think I have the mental capacity or whatever you want to call it, the
Yeah.
creativity to. Yeah, let's go. Plug it, man.
Yeah.
Let's yeah, plug it for the six people who are gonna watch this. So tell me more about that book. It's amazing. I can't imagine being able to write fiction, the amount of creativity and
Yeah.
yeah. Tell
Um,
me first of all how long how girthy is that book? That
this is about 600 pages and
oh
5 to
my
8.
oh my
Yeah, so in
God.
word count, that's 136,000, 130K, just to make it easy for all of us. Yeah.
130K thousand words.
Yep. Yep. 130,000 words. Yeah. I, I mean, I wanted to make it shorter because, like, it's like, I don't know, maybe it might be boring to you, but
No,
like a
no.
lot of, yeah, it's like, usually 100,000 is kind of the sweet spot, but if you're writing like fantasy or sci-fi, a little bit more, there's a lot more like, leeway. Sometimes when I was writing it, when I was like editing something like it, can I make this a little shorter? I'm like not really, because I go to a lot of like places, like the setting is just goes around everywhere, and there's really nothing I can take out. It's like, so yeah, that's why it's that big. Like,
Right. By the way, how did you know? How did you come up with the 100,000 sweet spot? Is that just a industrial statistical general knowledge?
yeah, that's basically what
Is what they
that's like
say.
the, yeah, that's the, what you call it,
So just
with common wisdom, or
yeah,
what is that?
common practice,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
industry standard, something like that.
I wouldn't call it industry standard. Just like that's like, it's like, I don't. I'm just losing my words right now, but
No, I
it's
know
like,
what you mean. Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
the courtesy, I guess.
Yeah, I was asking that because Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter would say the absolute contrary, right? I'm sure. Um, I mean, I'm
Yeah, I mean,
sure they're much
yeah.
longer than that, but
Mhm.
I guess they're the exception more than the rule. I guess the rule is that 100,000 word sweet spot, maybe.
I mean, like, yeah, it's a little like I think with Lord of the Rings, they like
By the way, just so everyone knows, I haven't read any of them. I can't fathom
yeah,
reading that much. Yeah, yeah.
and then like apparently his publisher's like, no, this is too long, so they split it into three books.
What?
You know,
It was one book. Oh my
it was
goodness.
originally one book, and then his
That's even
publisher's like, yeah, that's what I heard. It's like, and the publisher's like, this is too long. We'll split it up into three books. And
right,
to
right.
be fair, like a lot of like fantasy and sci-fi books are really like pretty long. So like this is, I guess, 130 is kind of around the range. But a lot of times like a lot of like fans, like Twitter and things like that, they're kind of annoyed at the fact that these books are too long, and like they're just like, just get to the point. It's like a lot of, because they just like kind of meanders, and like the story's supposed to be this, right? But then their books like like that. So
Yeah, I guess. Would you attribute that to the shorter attention span of today's generation, or maybe
yeah, I mean,
you're not just
yeah,
that good of a writer?
yeah,
What
that
is it?
that could be true. I mean, like I mean, there's this like, I know there's this movement. There's got like the new pulp, or like the pulp revolution, or things like that. So a lot of one of their like things they like to do is that they want to write the story to be as crisp as possible. So instead of like, like 100,000, 150,000, they try to go like, all right, let's go for like 40,000, 50,000. It's like, don't waste my time kind of thing, which is apparently how like a lot of like old school books are written. Like apparently. So the whole, the big, like you see like a Harry Potter book, it's like this big. It's like
Yeah, it's
that.
pretty, it's encyclopedic, probably is the word.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fairly recent. So it's like one of those like things. Well, I guess I don't know what's recent, but it's one of those things that's like, I guess people go back and forth. And do you want to read long or not? It's like, or do you like a shorter book?
Yeah. Well, going back to the original question, why do you write?
Mm-hmm. But I write.
Why do you
I
write?
mean,
Why do you
oh,
think?
why do I?
What's the allure of it psychologically?
Well, okay. Like I said, since I have to go by like bit by bit, let's try with like fiction. Why do I write fiction?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
I guess it's like I said, I like to be in my own world sometimes, for better or worse. So I like to like create my own like 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 in a sense like create my own like like the stories, like the world how it is. So there's like a bit of fun into it. It's like, okay, you know, I'm very like I can get really obsessed with like things like geography and like the world. Sometimes I just look at Wikipedia and like, hey, this is like, I don't know, like the streets of like Moscow, or like, oh, look at like Moscow or Russia or Canada or whatever. It's like, okay, this is how they do things. This is you know, and I just like to go into that. And at some point, all right, let me let me turn back a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then, hmm, and then there's also like, I play some video games. I read books too. So, I kind of like, I really get into like the whole, the fictional worlds into that. And at some point I'm just like, you know, why don't I just like write my own, because a lot of times, you kind of get into this, but then like, you kind of don't like the way some people write, or you kind of don't like the way the characters are, and then you're like, this isn't quite right. So part of it is like, why can't I just write my own? It's like write my own story, which is I don't know, this term is called like fan fiction. So some
Fan
people they like,
fiction.
write stories based on like, like I don't know, Star Wars characters and things like that.
All right, but they
And
interpret it in their own. They put their own flavor into it, something like that.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's kind of how I started. Like, I kind of write like a little fan fiction, but I never really like release it. I never really like put it to others. But then at some point, I just like, hey, let me write my own story. And I think that's probably a good thing, because if you write fan fiction, if I write fan fiction, I'll never be able to like be like my own like writing, just like riding on the backs of like I don't know George Lucas or whoever. So and I also won't be able to make money out of it. I get like if I try to publish a book, of like fan fiction, they'll sue me. So
There's
so
a lot of
that's
copyright issues there.
yeah, things like that. So you know that's how it is. And okay, one final thing I think since like we want to talk about like Inquisitor's Promise or like basically I call it the like my fictional universe. It's like one of the things I don't like is like I like sci-fi, right? I like the speculative fiction, the futuristic and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I don't like is the materialistic assumptions a lot of these stories have, like Star Trek, for example. You know, that's like I don't really want to get into it, because but it's like there's a lot of like leftist, I guess, to use a political parlance, and again, like I said, materialistic, view like you know into it. So basically, when I write my own story, I like to put in my own like I call it a Christian bent to it. And some people say, yeah, it's like some people who read my stories, like, yeah, I really work a lot of like Catholicism into it, and like and
I know. I noticed that. Yeah, I really noticed that.
yeah,
So
and
yeah,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. You have a strong familial religious background from what I can see in your writings. So that really inspired your fiction writing, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, why did you decide to well, let me go back to the writing thing. And let me probably say a few words about my opinions on writing and why I found writing um, why I started my Substack, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably the I don't know if you agree with me on on this. Probably the single word that I can that embodies my opinion on writing is probably therapeutic. I think
Mm.
it allows me. I think both of us are somewhat of an introvert,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
I think I really resonated when you said that you want to be in your own world or something of that nature. I think you're when you say your own world, you're a lot more extreme than me. I'm not criticizing. You're a lot more extreme than me to the point where you create your own fictional world of characters and things like that. I
yeah,
I'm on that same spectrum, but not as far as you.
yeah, yeah,
I don't have that much creativity, but I do love just you know even I write about business or economics. No fiction, any of that. I don't have the creativity to do that, but I still think that it just allows me to formulate my own thoughts and put it on paper and sort of refine how I actually feel and I guess a big part of it is also to share that to the world. It's kind of therapeutic to share sort of I don't want to sound like Freud or anything or Carl Jung or anything, but sort of show your real self to the world in a very articulate way on paper using narrative. Because I think as introverts, it's pretty difficult for us to express ourselves, um, in a loose way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
So for me, expressing myself on a blank sheet of paper, well, not paper now, blank sheet of whatever screen, and
Yep.
then allowing people to see that. I think yeah, it's probably therapeutic for me, and for you, someone who has written 136,000 words of which is unbelievable. I mean, it. I'm sure you also have some maybe also a therapeutic ritual where you allocate time, probably, I don't know, a few hours in the morning or whatever it is. Oh, okay, this is when I
Mhm.
write. This is when I allow myself to be just completely separate myself from the real world, whatever that means, and go to your fantasy world. It sounds like a bad connotation, but I don't mean it that way. Go to your fantasy land and indulge yourself and express yourself on it, right? I mean, isn't that kind of true? This whole idea of writing of being therapeutic for introverts like myself and probably yourself.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's more, yes, yeah, you're right. It is therapeutic. Like I've said it before elsewhere too, that it is therapeutic. So we are kind of on the same page on that one. And and in a sense, yes, it is kind of a fantasy world thing, but I guess the reason I really like to write, say, sci-fi instead of like fantasy, is because like I do like to have a certain like, so this is my bit of a pushback. I do like to have that there's need to be grounded in a certain sense of realism. That's why
Yeah.
when I'm putting in my own like, I think my own like, I don't know, universe, I guess. I made it. I don't really make like completely like. I don't really make something out of scratch. I take like it's like for example my novel. It takes place in the 74th century, right? So it's like around like 3,000, no, 5,000 years basically after this era, right? But then it's also like it's part of like there's a spanning timeline that's like 14,000 years, but it's like yes, this is based on like what could have been, like which is the fun part about like science fiction. It's like oh, it's like it could have happened. It's like it could have happened like maybe 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now. Which is like you can't really make that about like fantasy. Fantasy is like it's like
Narnia.
yeah, Narnia. It's like it can't happen. It's a myth. Like but like with sci-fi or it's like yes, it could have happened. Would it happen like that? Probably not, but it could have happened. And that's the fun thing about it.
Yeah, right, right. What do you think about writing nonfiction? Because you write on your, let me see here, you write on Indonesian American is your Substack, and you probably only write bi-weekly.
Yeah, bi-weekly.
And I'm sure, the things that you write over there are relatively short. As someone who writes regularly, I'm sure the amount of effort that you spend on your nonfiction work is probably like 1/100th of the amount of effort that you spend on your fiction work, right?
Yeah, yeah, basically.
Yeah. So tell me, actually, I wanted to go back to this question. Tell me why you started this Substack Indonesian American, because I think it's fascinating, and I think even if we didn't have this crazy background connection, I would still be a fan of it because I am an Indonesian who had spent living quite a decent amount of time. I spent 7, almost 8 years in Australia, and I think we've talked about it before privately, but it's an interesting topic, right? This topic of being an Indonesian or being an Asian or whatever, and then living a significant amount of time in a Western country, and what that does to your identity and all that stuff. Tell me why you created a whole particular Substack based on this theme. You obviously felt something about it.
Okay, so originally you can see this in my like about page of my Substack. But originally, like Indonesian American was actually in Blogspot. It's called Indonesian in America.
Right.
So that's when I write like I think that's your favorite one is like losing my language, right? So that's when I'm talking about how I'm basically more familiar speaking in English than in Indonesian, even
Sorry,
though
was that the one um losing my language? Oh, that was the one that I didn't ask you to write about, right? Remember I
no, that's
asked that was the one before that.
yeah, that's it's
Yeah, yeah,
called
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's a different one, but
Because you also wrote something about language, which
yeah.
but I think because I forced you to do that. This
Uh,
was the one before. Yeah, 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 yeah. People should check it out. I mean, especially if
yeah,
you're an Indonesian who, you know, whatever, if you if you've maybe traveled or went to high school or went to college in the US or spent some significant amount of time in a Western country, you should check out the Indonesian American by Michael Marpaung. Did I butcher
yes,
your name? No.
yeah,
Michael, yeah, yeah.
Michael
Yeah.
P.
Michael P.
Marpam.
Marpaung, and the Substack is Indonesian American. Wait, Indonesia American?
Indonesian, it's substack.com dash Indonesian American.
Yeah, yeah.
But,
I'm opening that. Okay, yeah. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
so yeah, just going back to like how it all started. So originally it's on Blogspot, right? But honestly, it's not really getting much traction. It's like I see some people reading it, I guess, but like barely anybody. Like
By
especially
the
my
way,
dad.
just sorry to interrupt you again. That whole idea of not many people reading it, to me, is sort of um, who cares? It's not really,
I
it's
guess
not
in a
really what I
sense
read.
it's yeah. I mean, it's who cares. Should it ideally it should be who cares, but it's like I want people to read my stuff. It's like to be honest, it's like I want people to know what I'm writing. I want people to like you know
Yeah, but that's
get
not the point. I don't think that's the
I,
point. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean, I guess
yeah, yeah.
you know.
So I keep
And
interrupting you. I apologize. You
no
started
worries.
on Blogspot, and then. By the way, why did you decide to even write it in the first place? That was my question.
Like write the Indonesian
This
in
this
America.
theme, yeah, this theme. Why do you think it's important to share about this
Hmm.
idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly it's something that's been in my head, right? It's okay, so may well I have sort of a theory, not a theory, but I have a basically I have a pet theory, which is I guess I'm gonna like shout it out. It's like there's this writer, you know, he's called E. Michael Jones, right? So he basically has this, you know, his theory is that language is basically what forms like ethnic identity, right? It's the cornerstone of identity, like somebody's language, right? Now, obviously, there's more to like identity than language, but like that's like the center, right? So basically, that's been in my head for quite some time.
Yeah.
So then I apply it to Indonesia, and I come to the idea is that the only thing that's keeping together Indonesia is the Indonesian language. Because if you see like um like Indonesian history, if you think about it, like maybe I'm gonna offend like some Indonesians here, but it's like Indonesia wasn't really a real country until the Dutch came in, to be honest. It's like the Netherlands came in, right? Like the Dutch, and then they like they slowly conquered like that, like Java, Sumatra, like all the islands,
What
that
do you mean not a
South
real
Africa.
country?
That's
Sorry,
like
what do you mean not a real country? You mean infrastructure,
it's not
economic
a
wise?
unified country. It's not like say France or it, not even or England, right? It's not like it's like you're a Javanese or a Papua or Orang Bali, Orang Batak or whatever, but you don't really consider yourself Indonesian until the Dutch came in, and
Oh,
we're
really? I
like,
didn't know that. So it was like the states before the Civil War or something like that.
I mean, like
When the states were just fighting each other, they were not
yeah,
the United States just yet until the Civil War, I believe.
I mean it's even more complicated because at least with America, you know, they were founded, they were all founded by the English colonists, right? So they
Right,
were
right,
all British colonies who rebelled. I mean, the states have their own identity, right?
right.
Before then, there's the Civil War, and then I mean that's a whole nother topic. But going back to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Indonesia,
yeah. We keep getting
um,
yeah, yeah.
like before the Dutch came in, we're all basically a bunch of like different ethnic groups, right? I mean, there's some kingdoms like Sriwijaya or Majapahit, all these kingdoms, but we don't really consider ourselves like Indonesians. We consider ourselves like we only became Indonesian because the Dutch came in. They formed one polity called the Dutch East Indies, and then at some point
Oh,
yeah,
right.
we're kind of tired of the Dutch, so we decided to fight them, you know. But
Yes, we did.
yeah, and basically that's how the Indonesian identity became to be. I mean, I'm skipping a few steps, but like that's kind of how it goes. Yeah, a little more. I'm just oversimplifying things, right? But
Right.
but basically the language, right? So there's a reason why I think I don't know for sure. Maybe I need to do more research, but I think the reason why like we decided not to go with the Dutch language, when like after we got independence is because hey, we need like a unified country, right? And if we're like speaking Dutch while like we just kicked off the Dutch, that's not really conducive to a unified identity. And that's why we need the Indonesian language, right? Which is basically like Malay, but it's kind of a constructed language, but not really. It's a little more complicated, but
Right. But how does that connect with the blog? Your idea of creating a blog, Indonesia America.
okay. So basically, I have a theory that like the Indonesian identity is based on the Indonesian language, right? That's basically how I think that's how it is, right? But then I noticed how like hang I tried to be like, hey, I want to be like an Indonesian, right? It's like that's where I came from, and yet
We're
I'm
speaking
more
English right
comfortable.
now.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable speaking English, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so then like I noticed like again, this might be another tangent, like, but I'm gonna go to my like my ethnic, my like tribe, basically, the Orang Batak. And one thing I noticed is that the more Indonesian they speak, like the less like Batak language they speak, the less connected they are to like the traditions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's like my mom, she doesn't speak any Batak at all. And she does not like the traditions. She gets really like, well, I don't want to talk about because I don't want to, it's,
Right, right. It's
but
fine.
I'm talking about my, but like, the point is she's not a fan. Just leave it at that. But like my dad, he's more accepting of it, and I think it's probably because like he speaks the language a little bit, not much, but he speaks the language to a certain extent. And
So it's this interesting dichotomy of being an Indonesian, I guess, genetically speaking, an Indonesian, and then but somehow because of your upbringing and so on, being more comfortable with the English language and how weird that feels, probably.
yeah, so in many ways, I'm more American than Indonesian. That's why I
Yeah,
also call
absolutely, absolutely.
Indonesian and American because, like, yeah, because like I can say, oh, I'm not American, but man, that'll be a lie. It's like, no, man, I
Yeah,
grew
yeah,
up in
yeah.
a grew up half in America. I'm like, I'm more American than Indonesian in many ways.
Yeah, it's
But
definitely an interesting topic. Hey, by the way, you know um how you measure that a conversation is good, that it doesn't feel long, right? You know
yeah,
that
yeah.
we're 59 minutes now,
Oh,
and
crap!
then
Wow.
right, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, wow.
So I have to stop this now because the recording I only have an hour. I'm using the free version of, but it's amazing, right? How fast this feels. So we should definitely
Yeah, yeah.
continue
We'll
this
do it
again.
more then, because like we haven't even gone to your story yet.
Yeah,
That's
it's amazing, right? So I guess we should do this again, and
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Just let me know when you're ready. And so I can see my schedule too.
yeah, absolutely, and we should discuss more about that Indonesian American identity thing. We've just scratched the surface of. We haven't gone deep into anything. So, Michael, thank you so much. I think this is like literally the beginning of many more
All right,
conversations to come. Thank you, man.
all right, all right,
Thank you.
all right, man.
See ya.
Take it
See ya.
easy. See ya.